Iniciamos nuestra jornada en Wells 2025 con una ponente que está a la vanguardia de la transformación digital en el sector salud. Sigrid Berge van Rooyen es una consultora internacional en inteligencia artificial aplicada a la salud. Su experiencia abarca desde la estrategia de datos hasta la implementación ética y efectiva de soluciones de IA en entornos clínicos. En su presentación De la idea a la revolución, innovación y IA en salud, Sigrid nos guiará a través del proceso de convertir conceptos innovadores en realidades tangibles que mejoran la atención médica y optimizan los resultados para los pacientes.
Good morning. So this will be an English presentation. So for the ones who need translation, please put it on. I'm Sigrid. I am obviously a very big foreigner here, I heard, standing across. So I live in Europe, in the Netherlands, and I support healthcare organizations with understanding what AI is, but also how they can implement it effectively. And today I'm going to talk about how to use AI from the idea, but also things you need to think about in healthcare. In healthcare, if you think about healthcare, there are several challenges. You have challenges about workforce shortages and burnouts. So that's limiting access to care. We see that in Europe. I assume that you also see the same thing here in Colombia or wherever you're from. And it really impacts the quality of care, because if you imagine that you don't have the doctors that you need, or the nurses that you need, or whatever medical profession you need, it really impacts the quality of care that you can offer. And then another challenge is the quality and safety of care. Again, it is impacted by the quality of care or the workforce shortage. But you have a lot of medical errors. I've heard crazy numbers from, I don't know if it's crazy, but like 10% of the EHR data, so the medical records, are errors, like it's a mistake, but also the medical errors that come from wrong diagnosis, wrong treatment, that impacts, again, how safe a patient will be, how effective a treatment will be. Technology adoption is also a different challenge that healthcare faces. It's still, I'm from Europe, and it's quite digital, but still, technology adoption is not everywhere. And you see the same thing here. I see in this great hospital, you're using quite a lot of technology. But it's a process, and it's not all technology at once, and not every step can use technology, but also there's so many different technologies, and how do they talk to each other? So you have interoperability challenges, but you also work with outdated technologies sometimes, and how do they work with new technologies? And that's one of the things that you see in Europe. We've had technology for a long time, so many of the systems are outdated, and now you're starting to talk about AI, and how do they connect with the old, outdated systems? And you still have a lot of manual processes. And then you have financial pressures. It's a big challenge, so who pays for what? Who pays for healthcare? Who pays for the technology? Who pays for the new processes that we're going to use? So there are a lot of challenges. These are some numbers from Sweden. And I think it's still representative for quite a lot across the globe. So 50% of people aged 50% of people aged 80 will increase. I'll say it again. People over the age of 80 will increase with 50% in the next years, so in 6 years. That's a lot, so growing an older population. But out of these growing up older population as well, you see more chronic disease. So 80% of people will be above 80 years old. They have minimum 2 chronic diseases. So it's not just one chronic disease, you're talking about multiple diseases. You have healthcare shortage, so staff shortage, the same as you see across the globe. Sweden is a small country, so they don't have that many big population, but there they need 85,000 more healthcare employees in 6 years. Because older people, the ones who are growing older, they're also working in the hospitals. So they go old, they're retired, what do we do with the spaces? Do we educate enough? Are there enough people to educate? And then one big challenge as well. So 2 days per week with healthcare professionals are used on admin, sitting behind the computer. So I have a healthcare background, and that is not the reason why I went into healthcare, to sit behind the computer. And now I'm working a lot with behind the computer. But a lot of the reason why people go into healthcare is to have compassion with patients, talk to the patient, have that social work, but you're using half your time behind a computer. So big challenges. We're going to talk a bit about AI, and I'm going to tell you about why as well. But we mentioned a bit yesterday, but there's kind of 2 big groups of AI. So you have narrow AI, so that's very limited in what it can do, but it specializes. So it's great for diagnostics, decision support, clinical research, really specific, narrow tasks. Then you have generative AI, which we've talked a lot about yesterday, and which is, I think, what most people think about as AI as well. And that's when it learns and acts across different contexts. It can be used to create text, music, videos, podcasts, you name it. So they're 2 different. So just know that there are, like, not everything of AI is Gen AI. If you use AI in healthcare, it has some potential to support. So it has a potential to support some of the challenges that I just mentioned. So reducing admin tasks, so it can free up time so that the healthcare professionals can use more time with patients, for example, or in other tasks. But also personalization. And I want to tell us a personal story, because my dad, he had cancer 10 years ago, and he got the standard treatment everyone should have. But 3 weeks later, he passed away, not because of the cancer, but because of the treatment. So this has become like a personal vendetta for me, because it's not every patient should have the same treatment. You have reasons, I don't know, it could be genetics, it could be lifestyle, it could be other factors that made sure that he should have had a different treatment than the standard treatment. And it's not that he didn't receive an error, because that was the standard treatment. He received the treatment he should have, but he passed away of the treatment. So if we can talk about personalization, figuring out what he should have had, what other patients should have for that treatment, maybe it was a mix of the other medical history he'd had, to make sure that he would have gotten the treatment that would made him survive the cancer. So I hear these stories a lot of people who didn't, the treatment is not working, or it could be many reasons why the treatment is not working. So how can we personalize the treatment so that patients become better sooner, so that patients get well, so that we don't need to spend a lot of the time in the hospital? Because if a treatment is effective, it's cheaper. Patients don't come back to the hospital. They don't get different diseases for that same treatment, adverse events. They get well. And then you can predict, so you can predict patterns and risk factors. So another example from Europe is a company that I'm working with, and they can predict who are in risk of acute care. So they're living at home, they once in a while they fall into the acute care, but how can you predict the ones who need acute care so you can prevent them? Because if that is also a big pressure for the healthcare system, and no, every country has different healthcare systems, so different nuances. In the Netherlands, where I live, there's a lack of general practitioners, so doctors. So some patients, they just go to the acute center. How can you predict those? How can you take away and predict and prevent? Then you can prioritize. You can rank patients based on the emergency, the risk factors, because if you go also, it could be to the emergency center, but it could also be normal treatment. Who should get the treatment first? Who should have the highest priority? Because there could be more, either more advanced disease, it could be delay the treatment, so who needs treatment when? And you can do that by person as well. But when I worked in the hospital, I was very frustrated with the prioritization as well. Because what is it based on? It was a bit You stick your finger in the air and you feel which direction the wind blows, and that's how you prioritize. It wasn't fixed, and I think we can prioritize much better. You can also use AI for clinical decision support. So provide real-time suggestions while you're talking to the patient, or maybe just after or before. And you can analyze data. And I think that's like one cue. Like, we're talking a lot about data. We have a lot of data. Healthcare collects so much data per day. I don't know who here works in the hospital or like in healthcare, or ever worked in healthcare, but you know how much data there is. And every time you see a patient, try getting an insight of that patient. Who are they? What have they experienced? What is their history? What type of diagnosis is important now? What type of symptoms do I need to think about it to know, to make my decision? You don't know always. Or you can spend a lot of time, 10 minutes if you're lucky, but there's not enough time to read all this data. You need to read chapters of books, libraries of one patient. So if you can get some data insights, and AI, we heard this yesterday as well, AI can figure out which type of insights are important for that specific patient. To get insights, how you give your treatment. So there's a lot of potential with AI in healthcare. If you talk about narrow AI, if you talk about generative AI, there's a lot of potential. So here are some, just an overview of some potentials of AI. I'm not going to go too much into it, but you can take a look at the study at another point. But you also see the different aspects you can go into AI and the potential applications there are. I give everyone the time to take a picture. There, but how do you get ready for AI? So talked about data. We talked about data yesterday. We're going to continue talking about data today. So you need a lot of data. You need training data. You need information to teach your model, to see patterns and predictions. And then next thing, you have an algorithm. So your instructions or the rules, what it's going to do. How does it solve a problem? How does it do a task? And then you have a model. So this is a result of training the AI algorithm with data. Yeah? So similar to a virtual brain, it's creating connections in the brain, classifications based on its learning. So if it has the data to learn something, it can predict something for the future. But there's an issue with our data. Our data is messy. Our data has a lot of errors. What I said, 10% of EHR data, I think is an estimation from Europe, there are errors. So it requires a lot of data, but if the data is shit, what you get out of it is also shit. So garbage in, garbage out. So you need to think about the data relevance, the data preparation, model training, model testing, all of that needs data. But if that data is not high quality, if there's mistakes in that data, if there's bias in that data, you'll get that bias in those algorithms as well and models. So another story from when I was in the hospital. I'm a clinical nutritionist, so I work with nutrition. And I had a patient, and I had to prioritize a patient. And I see the patient and the weight, and this patient is not eating a lot, 60 kilos. You use kilos here, right, in Colombia? Good, no pounds. So 60 kilos, normal height, not eating well. Okay. I'm like, okay, that's like a normal prioritization. It's not a high risk for me. So I had other patients, so I took other patients, and like, I'll go up to her later this week. The next day, I got another referral from a different doctor. Same patient. Suddenly, she was 29 kilos. First, she was 60. 1 or 2 days later, she's 29 kilos. That's not possible. So that's not possible, yeah? So there's error. There was an error in the data. There's an error in the referral that impacted one. It impacted my decision. But that would also impact the model. If that data was used to train a model, it would impact. And I think that's what we need to be aware of. If we want to use our data, the data needs to be good. We can't train our algorithms with data that's full of errors. So here's some data about errors. So 8 out of 10 errors could have been prevented. Medical errors. 15% of all medical diagnoses are wrong, delayed, or missed. 15%. 30% of errors are due to communication failures. I don't know how many times I've talked to people and it's like, oh, sorry, communication issues. That made sure, you're not translating it in the right way, or you're not understanding the same thing. Also, if I say, think about a cat, we all think about a different type of cat. If it's black, if it's striped like a tiger, if it's whatever it looks like. So the communication is important. 18% of misdiagnosis increase financial cost, or it increases financial cost with 18%, that's what I mean. So misdiagnosis, because you need different treatments, you maybe need to stay longer in the hospital. And for the US, it was estimated errors each year were cost 2.6 million, leading to 371,000 deaths and 424,000 disabilities, permanent disabilities. Those are huge numbers. So, healthcare has a data problem. And assuming that the data is ready is also an error. So in order to benefit truly from AI, we need to have our data in place. It needs to be ready. And unfortunately, most organizations do not. But you can get it right if you start it right. And I think that's when I talk to companies and organizations that haven't really started with working into the data and haven't started with AI, is doing it right from the beginning. You have the chance now to get your data right. In Europe, we've had EHRs for a very long time. I also talked to someone just now who had, from Colombia, who said you had had the EHR for 17 years here. And everyone who's worked in EHR with EHR systems or medical records, it's a bit random what you put in, how you structure it compared to your colleagues, what information you add, what information you do not add. It's not structured. If you do it now, you can put it right. You can also use algorithms to make sure that the data quality and accuracy is better, because that's important. You also, we heard about it yesterday as well, you need to think about data privacy, security. How do you make sure that the data that you have of the patient is secure, it's safe, no one else gets access to it? And the data integration and interoperability. You're working with so many systems. You have your EHR system, you have your different type of systems. How do you make sure that the data can flow across different systems, that the algorithms and AI tools can be used in those systems? What about bias and fairness? And some bias and fairness, you have a bias towards maybe a woman, someone with a different skin color, someone from a different region, from a different postcode. You can have bias there. And these, we're not always aware of them. Sometimes we're aware of it. Sometimes we're not aware of it. But they had a study with ChatGPT where they looked at how much bias it had. And it had a lot of bias. It looked at who would receive the best treatments. Any guess which type of population would receive the best treatments based on ChatGPT? White male. Surprise? They would receive more expensive treatments, more expensive procedures, if they based it on ChatGPT. Sexual diseases, immigrants. You have all these bias that are put into the models, that are put into ChatGPT. It's all about the data because we believe that, maybe immigrants have more sexual disease, STDs, or maybe, but it's also based on the data that we've had in the Western world. Okay, so white male, they do receive more expensive treatments because they have access to that. And that's perpetuated. And then you need to think about the ethical considerations as well with the data and regulatory. I'm not going to talk too much about regulatory because it's different in every region, and I'm from a region with very many regulations, and it's not making my life enjoyable. So you're really risking the impacts and the outcomes of AI if you're basing it on bad data. So you need to think about, how is my data quality? How is it amplifying data issues we're already seeing? Because it's amplifying the data the issues that you're seeing in the data. And how are you making sure that the efficiencies that we're trying to have, that they are efficiencies, that they're not leading to more work for us, but they're actually benefiting from it? So we need to make sure that we are not increasing the burden of healthcare professionals, that we're benefiting from it, because there are a lot of benefits that we just saw. And we need to verify the outputs. But if you're spending all your time on verifying a lot of these outputs, are the efficiencies, have you seen any efficiencies? You're spending all your time reviewing a summary that AI made for you. Are those efficiencies? And then into one. I said I wouldn't talk a lot about regulation, but this I want to highlight. So if you know everything about the bias, the data issues, the challenges, and this is a big discussion in Europe, should LLMs be regulated? Should they be regulated for medical use? We had a discussion in the bus the other day. Should they be regulated? And I don't have the answer. But we need to think about, how do the LLMs, so for example, if you make a patient summary, if you have speech-to-text tools, how are they influencing clinical decision? Because you have speech and you have a recording and you make it to a text, you create a summary. That summary is AI generated, yeah? AI defines what information you put in the summary. What information do you not have in that summary? Then your colleague comes in, they make a decision based on that summary, or based on that text. How does it impact clinical decision? Then the medical device companies say, no, but you need to have a human in the loop. You need to have a human person reading this, reviewing this, making sure the summary is correct. Okay, good. How about the efficiency? How much time do they spend reviewing a summary compared to writing it themselves? What are the benefits? Maybe the structure, that would be good, right? Is structure in the same way? But maybe there are a lot of benefits. I talked to someone from Scandinavia as well, in a region, not a hospital, a region, and they were looking into speech-to-text tools. And she said, for their doctors, they don't have time to write notes after each patient consultation. So they have one patient consultation, over to the next one, over to the next one. At the end of the day, they write all their summaries, all their notes. You can imagine how these summaries are, or the notes. Quality, not so good. Missed information, quite a lot. Details. In that case, having speech-to-text is a great solution, but they still need to make sure that the quality of that summary, the quality of the note is good. So you need to consider, what are the benefits I'm getting, what I'm trying to get out of this, and how is that impacting clinical decision, how is it impacting patient care, and how is it interpreting the medical data? How would it impact my care that I give, but also the care that the patient receives? So should LLMs be regulated? I don't have the answer, but I want you to just bring it and think about it, and maybe discuss it with colleagues and people here at this conference, because I think it's an important discussion to have with the benefits that we have. So how can we protect patient safety? You can use regulated and or validated tools. So making sure that they've been used and tested in clinical settings, in a similar setting that you're already going to use. We're testing it in your local setting. A lot of AI tools have been developed in the Western world based on Western data. How do you make sure that they can be used locally? Ethical use, making sure that data privacy. Informed consent. Have you asked your patient? I know you're very good at this hospital asking a patient if you can record their data, use their data, etc. But are you asking your patient if you can use speech to text? If you can ask ChatGPT, I don't recommend that, by the way, it's not for medical purpose, but if you can use it for the specific purpose. And then we heard about transparency and explainability yesterday. So how do I know that the model came out, like how do I understand why it came out with an output? How did it come to a decision it made? Do I understand that? Do I agree with that as a healthcare professional? Would I, as a healthcare professional, also know? Not always. Sometimes healthcare professionals also don't always know, but you can try to choose tools that are transparent in how they gather the data, explainable in how they reach the result. And then one of my favorite is literacy. How do you make sure that the people working with these tools understand the tools? How do you make sure that people working with these tools understand when to use a tool, when not to use a tool? The ethical implications of those tools as well, because it will impact patient care. So if you're going from a vision, AI has great potential. You need to understand what problem are you trying to solve? What vision do you have? What goals do you have with the AI, with data? So you need to really identify and define objectives and goals, talk to stakeholders, talk to doctors, talk to nurses, talk to physiotherapists, whoever is going to use this and be impacted by it, patient groups. What problem are you identifying? And then look at the organization. Are you ready? Because right now there's such a push for AI. You have to use AI. If not, you're missing out. You cannot deliver healthcare without using AI. That's not true. We've been delivering healthcare for a long time before AI. But you need to look at that organization. Are you ready? How is your data? What data are you having? How are you protecting your data? Is it interoperable? Do you have the tools and systems to use AI? Do you have the infrastructure? Do you have the money? Do you have the knowledge? You need to think about these things, because you can't just say, okay, I want to use AI, and tomorrow just go get an AI tool. And then you need to select and validate those tools. So which tools are you using? Is it going to solve the problem I'm trying to solve? Is it going to help me with the efficiencies I'm trying to go for? And you need to validate those tools as well in the clinical context. You can't just say, okay, just because it's been developed in US, it's going to work here in Colombia. How do you know? You need to validate those things. And then you implement. So you manage to choose your tool. You know that it's going to work for your goal, for the objective that you have. You have the structure, organization is ready. Yeah, it's selected. And then you implement it. You make sure that clinical staff is on board. They understand, but I hope that they've been on board the whole time because they've been used as stakeholders. But start small. Don't rush it to the whole hospital. Try it in one department. Try to figure out, okay, this is what we're trying to solve for. And then monitor. Is it working? Is it really achieving what we're trying to achieve? Is it working as we want it to work? And then if not, update. Talk to those medical device companies or whatever tool you're using. And again, don't forget stakeholder engagement. From the beginning, I put on the bottom so that you have it continuously, that you get the feedback from patients, you get feedback from staff, admin, IT people, whoever needs to be involved. I'm going to round off, but there are quite a lot of different views, and you can have looked at a lot of different surveys on AI, views on AI in healthcare. But 9 out of 10 of medical associations worry about AI in healthcare. 9 out of 10, 90%. 60% of patients are uncomfortable with healthcare providers relying on AI. Not using it, but relying. Really cannot provide care without AI. But 72% of organizations believe that the risks outweigh the benefits outweigh the risks. So there are more benefits than risks. And 70% believe that healthcare professionals will remain central in medical practice. You have other people like Bill Gates, who say that healthcare professionals will not be here in 10 years. I disagree, because I think working in healthcare, you know that you need to see a patient, you need to feel the skin, you need a person to do that work. And the empathy that we have, that AI doesn't have. AI is a computer. It can act empathetic, but it doesn't have the same empathy. And 89% of patients, they worry about transparency and openness, and they want transparency and openness in the use of AI. So if you use AI, when you use AI, I'm not talking about if, actually, it's when, because you will be using it at some point if you're not already using it. But be honest about that. Be open with the patients about that, transparent, and give them the chance to say no. Because without trust, we will not receive the benefits from AI. So you need to have the trust of healthcare professionals, you need to have the trust of patients, and we need to tackle these challenges in order to get there. That's it for me. I did have a couple of slides, but I'll say thank you for now. If you have any questions, please just grab me and we'll discuss, and feel free to connect with me as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much.